welcome to everybody tonight from across the globe. So I just want to say welcome and good afternoon or good evening to Oceania and Asian time zones. Good morning, good day, and good afternoon to European, African, Middle Eastern time zones. And a terribly early good morning to the Americas if you have made it today. We have an absolutely action-packed catch-up tonight or today or wherever you are in the globe. We have Dolf Becx and David Sheard speaking tonight, which we're very excited about. So I would just like to roll through and in the spirit of reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today throughout the globe. So in Australia, we recognise the traditional custodian, the Indigenous people of Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and their connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all people, all Indigenous people across the globe. I also want to extend and acknowledge a very respectful acknowledgement to any people living with dementia, certainly in any Indigenous space and across across any space, as Open the Doors is. So I would just like to provide a bit of an overview as to who is Open the Doors or what is Open the Doors. So Open the Doors is for anyone to not only express how they feel, but to just discuss any changes, any situation about dementia and aged care. It's also a place to showcase your amazing work and to allow you to no longer work in silo and be connected with global thought leaders, people living with dementia, carers, family innovators, designers of new models of care, and many others to enable tangible changes to be made. So this is a movement and it has been fantastic. It continues to grow. It will be fantastic. We are incredibly excited about everything that Open the Doors is. So I will do a group photo in a moment. I just wanted to run through a quick little bit of housekeeping and then we'll do a group photo. So I'll contradict my housekeeping and then I'll just provide a little bit more of an update. So for housekeeping, just during the evening, day, morning, wherever you are situated throughout the globe, we would like cameras on as much as possible, but we need mute on. We will hold for question time, and we'll have question time at the end of each presenter's presentation tonight, just to facilitate a bit smoother running of things and to make question time a bit more specific. What I might do is pass over to Nicole.
I just want to introduce the first speaker. The first speaker tonight is a lovely gentleman called Dolf Becx. I was introduced to his work recently by Monique Pochran, who went to see him, and he humbly showed her around the care farm that he has developed. He is a consultant for improvement in housing and care and welfare, especially for people with cognitive impairments. Communication specialist for companies with special products or service care related personal coaching. He's a trainer in the Böhm method model of care, which is similar to, he described it as the German Kitwood, but no one can read it because it's all needs to be translated from German language, which I'm fascinated to know more about. I hope you find him as interesting as I do, because what he's doing is the next level of dementia support. Community Home Australia is always looking for new ways of advancing, and I really feel that he is his reablement model holds a lot of hope in this space. So without further ado, I will let him give an overview of the incredible work he's doing, and thank you so much for sharing it with us tonight.
Thank you. Well, you laid the horizon for me. Yeah, but my name is Dolf Becx, and I must apologize in advance because English is not even my second language, so I'll hope I'll be as understandable as possible for all these English-speaking people. I'll try. Good. I'll have 20 minutes, so I'll put on a bit of a stopwatch and I'll keep being in time. Let me introduce you the Böhm method for dementia care and support. And in the first place, I have to say that it is for not only for dementia care, but all kinds of cognitive impairment. So it could even be used for children with development problems. But well, we are going to talk about dementia care. We always talk about dementia care, but in fact, we are in reality working on support, because care is something for a registered nurse. We are talking about supporting daily life for people in dementia, so it is not all about care. It is, that's good to know, a validated method officially by a university in Lower Austria. And it is not a whole new thing. That means that whenever you have an approach that's working, it could be used as a layer over it to improve your own approach. And the main theme is learning to look through the eyes of people, see through the eyes of people. So that is what I'm trying to talk about you in a bit. Next, please. Yeah, this is me. Not so important. You can read it afterwards again. I'll do it for some time. And this picture is very recently taken in Oregon, in America, where I was last week. So it's not in Netherlands. Okay, next. Yeah, this is the founder of the Böhm method himself. I thought I'd introduce him for a moment to you because he is the important man behind the method. His motto is Aufleben statt aufheben. That's a German. Revive instead of leaving them behind. And that's important because it's about activating. It's about putting people in dementia again in the middle point, letting them be as important as they may be. And he has some specific quotes which I would like to give you here. And dementia care is best practiced with your hands on your back, because it's about autonomy, for instance. And do not confuse those who are already confused. We are very good in that. People in dementia are sometimes helplessly exposed to our charity. And they want to be people just like us, valued as normal people, and will make this much mistakes that they sometimes feel otherwise. And freedom. Freedom is something very important for people in dementia as well, for us, of course, also. It's a fundamental right, even as it comes with daily risks, such as falling. So in our support, we do not talk about you can do this and you can't do that, because we have risks, we have solutions for it. Yes, go on, please. This might be interesting for people because I already heard you, Nicole. Monique visited us on our care farm. A care farm is a quite specific Dutch invention, I guess, where we try to have people all day long. Most of the people come more than one day a week, but it is real therapy that we do in that. It's not just drinking coffee or something like it. It is about really activating people, supporting autonomy, stabilize emotional behavior, provide freedom of handling, provide a feeling of being useful, it's quite important as well. Prevent moving to a nursing home. That's for us a very important job, because this method is really invented to try to prevent people going into nursing homes. Of course, it is usable. It's also usable for in the nursing homes, and I'll tell about it, but that's the most important thing. And then, as a result of it, we support also families at home. That is what we're doing here on the care farm. It is just a bit of an impression. And you see in the last picture, the owner of the care farm herself, Ms. Helen Jungebert, who is, of course, very important in developing this method here in the Netherlands. Next. The current challenge that we face in the Netherlands anyway, and I think it is not much different from other countries, but just to say in what background that we work here in the Netherlands is that 1 out of 5 people develop a kind of cognitive disorder, and mostly dementia. That means that our chance to become a person with dementia is about 20%. And if you realize that, that means that you're not only working for other people, you work for yourself maybe as well. So many people to be hit by dementia in the near future. And then we see that nursing homes and as well sheltered housing, they are limited solutions in the Netherlands. They lack staff, that's the most important problem, and they lack finances. And we get a real right-wing government in the upcoming time, so it won't improve, I'm afraid. So many more people in dementia have to stay at home. And that might be a blessing for them because people want to be at home, want to feel at home, but it's a huge challenge for partners and family. We should not forget that. And then we read so much good. That's an important thing as well. There's much inventions done in the latest 10 years maybe, but the problem is that theory is not yet practice. Where people in dementia really benefit from, those solutions are quite scarce, and that's a bit my role, that I try to translate theory into practice. And this all is mainly because we should not forget that dementia is real complex, and so this is important to know that there is some work to do. And for those who realize that dementia needs support of daily life, far more than institutional care, and it needs logical thinking, then the Böhm approach, I think, could be really enhancing your results. That's what we're trying to offer in this method. Next, please. Improving your own approach has basically two main tools. One is that we use something out of the psychoanalytic world, and that is the knowledge of the reverse development. I don't know if you know him, but Erik Erikson was the inventor of psychosocial development. And he invented that development of a baby from up to a grown-up person is in 8 stages. And you'll see these 8 stages, if you look well, back in a reverse way in dementia. And that's why we work for it. This reverse development is not coincidentally comparable with the Reisberg Global Deterioration Scale. And I think that's used all over the world. It's not for nothing a global deterioration scale, the 1 to 7 scale that is used to face dementia. And that means that early in dementia, for instance, you will experience your life increasingly as a young adult and not as a grown-up who can look behind his life anymore. You want to be seen, you want to be useful. The stage where you're in is measurable. It's made measurable in this method. And that means that you know in what stage you can interact with people. Are they still young grown-ups? Are they more adults? Or are they in the other way, reversed, more like teenagers or even children later on in the phases? And that's important because there is a useful instrument. This is a useful instrument to know on what level of their reversed development people are. So the measure instrument, I had a little image there, but it is all Dutch, so I didn't see it necessary to blow it up for you, but you see that there are graphics how it works. But well, I'll explain later when there is an English version of our education. Next, please. The second one is the knowledge, the deep knowledge, and that's the most important one, of the personal experienced life. That is what we put in as an extra above all the good approaches that I think you all use but where you can learn more from. In dementia self, if you suffer from dementia, you try to understand your environment, the real here and now. It's not about the past, but the here and now, with old memories, with old skills, old experience and copings. And that makes it so difficult for people in dementia to cope with now, with the moment where they live in, because they do not maybe remember 5 minutes ago. They live really in the here and now, but they do it with the old skills. And it becomes slowly the only world they understand. All the rest might be disturbing, strange, even frightening, as if the world around there is another planet. And that's what we have to face with dementia. We have to realize that. So if you really care about people in dementia, you should be deeply interested in the personal way of how their daily life is experienced. And I'll explain, of course, later how we do it. Learn their history, hear their stories, know their background. And that's what the main thing, learn to look through the eyes of someone in dementia. You have to have the ID, I know him or her so well, and be curious, I see Rhiannon. Yes, of course. You have to know them so well that you can be in their skin, as it were. That is what we try to learn in this method. Next, please. And the added value of the tools that I just gave to you is, first of all, improving results of your own approach, because it's about your work. Profound knowledge of how people in dementia experience the here and now. It will strengthen any proven approach in dementia care, or better said, support. It will really enhance, I think, your way of working. And for us in the Netherlands, and I hope hopefully for you in the future as well, open the doors is not exactly opening doors in nursing home. It's opening doors to life for people, I think, in dementia. It's preventing hospitalization, less regression, less problematic behavior, what is one of the most important reasons in the Netherlands, I'd say, for people to move to a nursing home. Not their own instability, but it is that problematic behavior. More autonomy, more meaningful activities, more self-esteem, and above all, that means less stress at home, and then you keep up longer. And the third thing is alive with dignity until the end, until the very end, even in dementia care. Meaningful interaction, even without speech, is possible in this method. And while you know how to look through their eyes, and that's not that you learn that in the earlier stages, but it's your information that is also useful when these people come deeper in dementia and don't speak anymore. You know how they feel. This meaningful interaction, even without speech, will stay. They will be understood until the latest phases in dementia. And I saw it in some homes that do also work also with Böhm in Luxembourg, for instance. People are active until the last few weeks of their lives. They die with dementia, from pneumonia or whatever, of old age, but they do not die because of it anymore. That is quite important as well. Now, 3 most important values, I think, of the tool. Let's go on with the tool itself. Next, please. So we're going to look behind the surface now. We just saw a bit what it should do, but well, there is a mechanism behind it, and I'll try to explain a bit about the mechanism today, because you're all very specialized in it. In dementia, you try to understand your environment with old personal memories, with skills, with experiences and copings, and those things we'd like to find out. It becomes the only world you understand, and all the rest, as I said, is disturbing, etc. So if you really care about people, you should be deeply interested in the personal way of their daily life, their history, their stories, their backgrounds, and I mean their cultural backgrounds as well, and what they think as daily normality. That is that learning through the eyes of dementia. But I mentioned that before, so go on with it. Next, please. Yeah. Some details of this step. It's only you, when you suffer from dementia, who knows how you experience the world around you. No one else can experience the world as you do yourself. That counts for us all. I only can think how I talk about how I feel deeply within, and that's for people in dementia, not another way. You are your only reliable source for your emotional needs, for your emotional thinking. And even if you have a twin brother or sister, they experience the world differently. And think about, for instance, a funeral or a marriage. How did you experience that funeral or that marriage, and how did your sister or your brother experience it? That could be different. So that is important to know, because that emotional feeling is so useful for looking through the eyes of people. And then I have to know the reverse development again. In dementia, it is merely about your experience until you came an adult. There's a bit of a difference in the theory. Is it 23 for women, 25 for men, or can it even go on until 30? Because we are experiencing more emotional development in this generation than generations before, for instance. You rely on your imprinted, as it knows, memories. That's what important. Your partner and your children, therefore, are no useful sources at all, because they come later in life. And I see so many nursing homes still looking at information that was given by children, what was given by the partner, but it is nothing for the emotional world that you need to really know people in dementia. So learn to listen. And every life story then is important. While telling a life story, people in dementia are in therapy. Then they are important for a moment. They are in the middle. They listen to you for, you listen, as you, if you suffer dementia itself, they listen to you for a moment. So you are important. And as Böhm also said, and I think it's very important, every person, also in dementia, should be important at least once a day. And while you're talking about people in dementia who can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago, you should make them important every 5 minutes. So many compliments given to people in dementia all day, and some people in care say, "Oh, I keep on giving compliments," but it is so important. They are important like that. Next. And our challenge, of course, because if you hear life stories for people in dementia, if they can still speak, that's too much to collect. That is one of the critics that I get. If I got life stories all day, what shall I write down? I have already so many administrative time to lose. How can I gather all that? But that is not important, because you have to know what's important. And for instance, for early stages, it's just important to know that you hear from the people what contributes for them for happy moments on a day, because you have to fill in support a day in which they are content, they feel content. What are the key stimuli to activate in a positive way? Do they react on animals, on flowers, on music, on dance, on whatever? Know it and share it with your colleagues. That's one of the important things as well. Don't keep it for yourself, but share it. What food does someone really like? Because food can be comfort sometimes. What are typical coping strategies? If you know how people talk in expressions, for instance, you can use these expressions to have contact with these people. What special interests does someone have? What for was he important in life? What activities are experienced as meaningful? That is very interesting, because people in early dementia stages, as they feel like growing up adults, young adults, they want to be meaningful. They want to participate. They want to be part of the world, and they want to be accepted as that. That's for early stages. Only those information is important. And then, next, advanced stages, which of course is more difficult, deeper in dementia, communication becomes difficult. But there are some things, if you gather them, if you know what it is, you can work with it. For instance, what is feeling at home? And so long in the Netherlands, it was preached that finding the right chairs and the right wallpaper was the solution. It isn't. Maybe a bit on their own rooms, but it is about are they acknowledged as who they are? What I want to hear, how important they can be. Can you really communicate, interact with them? Who was their role model as a child? Because if you know that, you know how they act and you know how you can react. What identity does someone wants to show? Someone can sit in a wheelchair and can bow his head down, but maybe it was a bank director and he wants to be seen as a bank director. He's important, and you make him important during the day. What promotes self-esteem? Very important to get, and you have to find out from the life stories. They tell it, and maybe they have fantasies about it, but those fantasies are in their own emotional world. Because I knew someone who was a clerk in quite a small town for local government, but he wanted to be a fireman. He wanted to be that all his life, and he became it when he was in dementia. And we saw him as a fireman, and that gave him his importance. Such things are possible. They're not even exceptions. And then what was the most important reason to live? Because everyone who becomes old has lived for something. Taking care of other people, for instance, or for animals, or being a good entrepreneur, or cleaning, or whatever they find important for life, because they became old. And if you have nothing to live for, you will not become old. So these people are in a certain age, so that is that means that they have something to live for. And it might be a little flame that is left, but if you know it, you can translate it to things they can do today. And that's what we try to do. What still feels meaningful now? Someone who took care of his children, his parents, grandparents, or whatever in the past, will now maybe help with simple household things, but there they feel important with. Yeah. The method provides then instruments to measure the stage of reverse development. That's also important, because we have two important measure instruments. You saw the first one. And this one is about the 8 feelings, emotional feelings that come with your reverse development. And you can simply choose what you see in your observations. And if you observe well, you see where the emotional feeling has lacked the most on an abstract way, and you can work with this. So there you found out, did I found the real identity of the men or women? And if this scores too high, you didn't find it, you go on. That's all things. So we can measure this also. That's just my message. Further on. And then about observation. That is where this method can improve your own way of working, because most dementia care methods or approaches or whatever, they start with observation. But dear people, we cannot observe objectively. That's not a human thing. If we've learned for it, we can do it for 20%. That's it. And the rest is our own images, our own emotions, our own feelings. And people in dementia can't come with you anymore. You have to go into their world. And that is why knowing the life stories, knowing their backgrounds, knowing the people, be able to look through their eyes means that your observation will be far more objective. So that's where it comes and where it helps. And keep thinking logically. Striking behavior, for instance, is a signal instead of a problem. Striking behavior means that people do something in an environment that for you doesn't fit, but it means that they do not understand the environment. And there you have to be able to know to change it with your knowledge you have from the people. If you have learned enough about the personal history, you can analyze and understand the behavior. So if you can't analyze and understand behavior, be sure you just haven't learned enough about the personal history. That's simple. That's logical thinking. Next, please. We're coming up to step 3. Whenever you have these stories, you have your observations. You could do the observations in all kind of ways. There are some English methods by I can't remember anymore. Anyway, life stories and observations makes you understanding the emotional needs in early stages when people still speak. And that means that in early stages, you can, with this information, see what the dominant emotional problem is. Then you know where you have to work on in your support. You can add it with knowledge about feeling at home, old role models, identity, all the things I gave away before. Then you learn also to understand the needs and problems in advanced stages when people don't speak anymore, because apathy or something is coming quite early sometimes. And with that, we try anyway, you should do also, because that's an improvement maybe as well, to set clear goals and even more clear actions for improvement. Because in our meaning, in our method, dementia is not something that is, well, sorry, but the end of your life, but it's like another care ambitions. You can set goals, you can come to some solutions in some ways. And respect with it autonomy as much as possible, and take as much care with your hands on your back as long as it is possible. If you take that with you, it will help you out. Step 4. Next, please. Yep. And when you talk about goals in dementia, it's the administrative way I'm talking about now, of course. You have three sort of goals that you could put actions in. First of all, the goals for the individual well-being. What do I, in my dementia, need to feel good in my daily life? As I try to explain with the difficult way of how I speak English anyway, before in the slides. Goals for social well-being. Because you have to know that people want to show their identity, want to be part of community. Every human being wants to be part of a group. There may be some hermits, but normally you want to be part of the group. And if people in dementia are isolating themselves, it means only that they are not quite able to find the connection with a group. That's where your supports come in. What do I need to feel good between others? And then the goals of well-being, this is for nursing homes exactly, especially, during the inevitable care moments. How do I want to be approached to feel okay during my moments of care? And that does the economy of the autonomy come in. Because so many moments of care, because they are hasty and they have little time and they want to take over, makes it so problematic in care. And it's not necessary, because if you know how people react, it could be better. But well, you have to change quite an organization in your nursing home to have time for that. That's I imagine. Be sure that every goal, that is your proof that every goal can be justified from the analyzed needs or emotional problems. Because what did you do before? You said, I have these life stories, I have my observation, I have a dominant problem, I know where to work on, and I have my solutions. So if you have solutions, they have to be found back. If you analyze it back, they have to have a clue, a relation, I have to say, with the emotional problem, with your observations, and in the first place, with their life stories. Otherwise, you are solving the problems of yourself and not the problems of the people in dementia. And that is important, just to look back for being certain that you're doing the right thing for the people in dementia and not solving your own problems. So that's what Anna needs. Next. I've tried to put it, that's what we work on in Böhm as well, in a sort of circle. It is an iterative process circle, because if you are at the end, you can begin again, because not always you have found the solutions at once. But this means that in the first place, in the middle, you see this personal biography, stories, emotions, experiences, personal stimuli, copings, whatever. And this is always on its way, because you hear new things during the relation you have with people in dementia. They tell you new things, they react on things that you never knew before, and it fills more and more the knowledge about the people. So that goes on everywhere. But if you have enough information, you can do a good sort of observing. And that makes it, with the biographical knowledge, quite objective. With that, you can identify the emotional needs and the requested support. And then you do this first measurement, the graphics, and you can check if you're taking the right measurements. If yes, you go on to the solutions. If no, it might mean that you have to go search deeper. Is there a trauma? Is there something they experienced in life early and didn't talk about? Can they even talk now anymore? So there you go, the emotional, searching for the emotional, abstract emotional needs that they have, and fill them in, like identity, self-esteem, life, emotion. And you'll find out there are people, of course, that suffer from a combination of psychological problems and dementia, because we know that there is a connection between them, and sometimes you need a specialist. But if you have this all together, you again can go to the interventions, goals, and actions. And if you do the evaluation, you find out whether it works or not, because you are going to analyze back, as I try to explain to you. You go to look, what am I doing? Has this a relation with the dominant problems? Has it a relation with their life stories? And if you find out you haven't done the right thing, they don't react yet the way you thought they should react, know that you missed something, and try again to find in the circle, where did you miss it again? Because it are human beings, individual human beings, and everyone is different. So you don't find it the first time you do the round, mostly. Next. I think it's up to you now. Yes. I hope it was a bit clear, because I have some difficulty in speaking English.
No, we got the message loud and clear. There's absolutely no difficulties there. Look, we're going to do quick 5 minutes. I was hanging off your every word, as everyone else was. Dolf, do we have permission to share your slides with the group? So
absolutely, that's what they asked for. Yes, they can read it maybe more clearly.
Thank you, and we will obviously empower you to follow Dolf's work, and I'm trying to go back there next year to Amsterdam to see it in live time and bring something similar back to Australia. Questions. The first person was Althea. If you'd like to ask a question, I saw you put your hand up early in the piece. Then Michael Page, and then we will go to Gwenda Darling, and we will quickly go to David, because we've got a lot more to get on with tonight, and another amazing talk ahead of us. So Althea, do you have a quick question? Althea, we might go to Michael Page for now. Michael, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, I do. Firstly, that was amazing. I've got 100 questions, but one that springs to mind, and thanks, the presentation was very clear and very concise in English, so well done. I guess in Australia, we're quite familiar with the Dutch dementia village model, like De Hogyvik and places like that. I just wondered whether the Böhm method, it seems to align with that somewhat, but you talked about normality and the importance of normality. So is that something that really maps well to those specific dementia village models, or is it something different?
Well, let me start something positive. I'm always very happy if there is real attention for people in dementia, and we're all trying to find out what's the best solutions.
Yeah.
But those villages, if I may be honest, they're crap.
I agree, Dolf. I agree.
I'm very sorry, but how can that work if everyone's personal life is so individual? How can you create a village in advance before you even met them? And as we know now that it is not about furniture, not about cups and whatever things. You cannot provide good dementia care with building those villages. But if they were so clever to put in a method, and it doesn't necessarily need to be our method, to do a good support of people in dementia, it might in some way help, because, well, they have some shops in walking away distance, that sort of things. But that's what they don't do. We have a lack of staff in the Netherlands, and that no one can help that so quickly. But they put in people from our foreign colonies as supporters. They don't even really speak well Dutch. They come from another culture. They don't understand each other. Not every caretaker there has a real good feeling on working, because it is not that good paid. So there it goes wrong. So is a village like what you mean in Weesp, Hogerwij, for instance, a solution? And itself, it is not. I'm very sure about it.
Thank you, Dolf. I appreciate your answer. Gwenda, a quick question.
Hi, thanks, Dolf. I thought that was interesting. As a person living with dementia,
Yes.
I'm wondering how you relate to people who've had traumatic childhoods they no longer wish to visit, and how does that trauma come through in the dementia that you see? Are the people acting with behaviours triggered by the trauma, or I'm just wondering about how you deal with that.
Yeah. That's when you come into one of the most difficult parts of our work, of course. And yes, they in a reverse development, your trauma becomes worse, of course, and you haven't got this cognitive instruments anymore to push it away, and it comes high up. What should have been done is that these traumas were taken care of during the development in childhood. That should have been the real solution, and that isn't happened. That hasn't happened. So we get them back as fiercely as possible. And if you maybe I come from the Netherlands, so I'll be straight. There are two kinds of solutions. Or you're trying to do the psychological aid and help that wasn't done in childhood for the first place, and for some people it could help, and that is a distraction and trying to find the meaningfulness in something positive. But it is difficult, I must say. And the second one is that many of those people say, whatever happens, I am not willing to feel this trauma again. So I don't want to live anymore when this trauma comes up again, from my fourth or fifth or even later years. And we try to slow up the regression process. That is something that we can try. But in the end, I must say what's quite this moment actual is that we are talking about euthanasia as well. in time for these people. That's what I want. I'm sorry to say, I don't know that in every culture really a thing to talk about, but it is in the Netherlands.
Realistic.
Well, thank you so much for that honest answer, and we could almost do a whole hour on that topic alone. Thank you so much, Dolf. I knew this would have a lot of value, and I'm really excited to bring your work and Böhm's method to another audience that has not been unpacked before. I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from each other. And I'm hoping that you and David also learn from each other, because I think you are kindred spirits on the same side of this conversation, from similar angles and also different experiences. So without further ado, I'd like to present Dr. David Sheard. He is a professor of emotional intelligence. I did not even know that was a thing until he did it. So, and it suits him perfectly. I have had a personal academic crush, I like to call it, on David's work for about 7 years, and I have based a lot of community homes model on his work. And anyone that's listening today or knows our method well will see the similarities. He is an internationally respected trainer, author, filmmaker, motivational speaker, consultant. He's won lots of awards, and he has established a revolutionary model of dementia care. His person-centered ethos has challenged accepted models and social norms and brought about positive change around the world. And I'm very excited to hear him speak, and I hope that you enjoy his model as much as I do. So over to you, David, when you are ready.
Thanks, Nicole, and great to see all the faces around the world and to be a part of this. A real pleasure and an honour. And I'm coming from this perspective of having been 44 years in dementia care, which I don't add up, because really I think I'm 36 when I'm 66, so that doesn't quite work out, does it? And I want to really talk about my experience over those sort of 44 years, really. My presentation is going to be very much more of a macro presentation, rather than Dolf's micro one in the detail of how, because I want to really reflect on what I feel have been the blocks over the decades of me working. People may know me from having developed butterfly homes in 5 countries around the world. I've not been involved with butterfly homes for the last 5 years, and as Nicole said, was made in the UK the first professor with this title of emotional intelligence in care. And that's because after all my career of 40 odd years in dementia care, I really have come to the conclusion that it's actually not about people with dementia at all. It's not about dementia care. It's all about emotional intelligence in all of us. And I was known, and I've smiled a lot at Dolf's work, because I was known for the famous phrase, feelings matter most. And Dolf's work so much echoes the importance of what I believe, which is that people living with dementia are more emotional beings than thinking beings. If I take to the title of my presentation, so the next slide, thank you. And this is what I wanted to talk about. That, you know, people might say, what crisis? And I'll talk about that, because there is a crisis worldwide in dementia care. And that crisis exposes vulnerability in the whole care sector in different countries. And really, that crisis is a crisis of beliefs. So here we all are, passionate people, the converted audience, but we do not yet have a worldwide audience of the scale that's required. And that's why Open the Doors 2030 is an amazing global initiative to try and increase the size of the converted worldwide audience, because we still have a huge scale of agenda forward. The sector is therefore very vulnerable because it's in crisis, and I'll explain more what I mean by that. And because the sector is vulnerable because of the crisis globally, staff are therefore very vulnerable in it. And staff are very vulnerable working in dementia care. And certainly in the UK and in my research in other countries, it's leading to a mass exodus. And we need to therefore ask ourselves, what is the reason for this mass exodus from the care sector from working in dementia care. And I'm going to give you my theory about that. I want to preface the whole of this presentation with one comment, which is it's very difficult to disrupt a care sector where thousands of people such as yourselves and the people you will be working with, are involved in daily acts of love and kindness. And so there is a real dichotomy between knowing that there are thousands of individuals out there coming from a place of heart and love and kindness, and yet we have to accept that the scale of disruption that the care sector needs is monumental. And that those individual acts of love and kindness, in my experience, are not disrupting the sector at the scale that it's required. If I go to the next slide. This was a comment. I did research in 1995, and it was a study with 500 people living with dementia to get their lived experience. And this quote always stays with me. I don't think you'll like what I'm going to say, but a lot of people are saying it's like jail. And the reason I share that from 1995 is we still have to ask ourselves very harshly, almost 30 years on from Kitwood, 30 years on from this person living with dementia in Coventry in the UK, saying it's like jail, how many thousands of people around the world would still be saying it's like jail? So go to the next slide, and let me talk then about the crisis. So if we, it's accepted in Australia, the aged care sector is in crisis. And this is a quote, the failings are systemic and they require fundamental structural change. And aged care has been commodified by corporate and church operators, putting profits before the needs of older people, as decades of neoliberal policies take their toll. And then we jump, and can I just say before I move off that slide, I've been in Australia a number of times. And, what I saw was that the Australian hotel model alive and not so well. And I was shocked when I kept arriving at these large scale, hotel scale care homes, in inverted commas, where people felt very proud of them, very defensive of them, and not open to any disruption. And yet it was so clear the minute you walked in that the places were not alive and well. Let's shift to the crisis in Canada. This next slide, thanks. And so we go to Canada. And Josephine knows I've nearly lived in Canada for a number of years, working there. And the Royal Society of Canada argues that tackling the long-term care crisis will take radical workforce reform and redesign, not only around low wages and resource shortage, but about how you rebuild trust and dignity back into a care sector in Canada. And certainly again, during COVID in Toronto, they brought in the army to support care homes. And what that led to was a major report from the army about abuse and scandal in the long-term care sector in Canada, in Ontario. Let's jump then to the USA. The slide on the USA. The crisis everyone must face is described in the USA. The system is such that people can no longer care for themselves, but it's broken and costly. And that, the USA, shall I say, perhaps like myself, are great talkers, building flash white modern institutions. And although the greenhouse model is alive and well in the States and trying to challenge that, that challenge is still monumental to the majority of major care homes out there looking like major hotel institutions in the States. And then back to the UK. So in the UK, we've had 30 years of Kitwood, and you would expect that in the UK we had advanced at a major rapid scale, but not. The social care crisis here is huge, deeply flawed, in need of urgent reform, huge problems about regulation. And what we have in the UK is what I describe as a post-COVID grip in the care sector that took the care sector back 20 years in a stroke. And I always argued that Kitwood's work and my work, was always waiting, that the old culture's sitting on the back of the heads of our necks there, waiting to grab us. COVID gave it the perfect platform. And what we watched was thousands of people who had followed Kitwood, followed my previous butterfly home model, followed, Dawn Brooker's work in the UK, followed Sterling. Suddenly, it was as if the 20 years, 30 years of it had never happened, and the old culture took grip again. And the old culture is now got a stranglehold in the UK. It isn't that we got post-COVID and all returned back to the innovation. It's like, no, we're now obsessed with infection control, safeguarding on physical risk, but never on emotional risk. So we've got a big crisis globally. What am I saying about that? If we move to the next slide. This is my challenge to Open the Doors 2030 and to all of you. Person-centered language has got hijacked. I don't know about where you work and in your countries, but every care home brochure and website in the UK says they're person-centered. Person-centered has become a meaningless hijacked language and has proliferated the care sector. What are we going to do about that in Open the Doors? How are we going to get the language back to what it really meant? Secondly, Dementia Care has become obsessed with therapies and meaningful moments. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not going to want to deny any person living with dementia any therapy, any meaningful moment that changes their lives. But suddenly dogs become therapy. Dolls become therapy. Everything has to be turned into a medicalized therapeutic input. Rather than saying, we're talking about real emotional content of people's lives, like Dolf was. And so I'm very skeptical at this massive industry of therapies and meaningful moments in what is a broken national macro care home culture. My third challenge to Open the Doors 2030 is we have not got an acceptance of true household scale living. So I go to a care home only 6 weeks ago that has built 28 beds, wings, and 3 of them. So it's a 78 bed care home, and it thinks it's leading edge, modern, cutting edge, having got 28 people living in a wing. When we go home tomorrow, tonight, this morning, none of us will go home to live with 28 people. And I know all of us would start screaming the walls down if we did. So we have, even with the greenhouse model, the butterfly model, many leading edge models in the world, we have not yet got an acceptance of just basic, well, what Dolf referred to, what I refer to, the feeling of being at home inside yourself. The next slide, thanks. So, challenge number 4 to this network is private equity and architecture are in collusion. Private equity and architecture collude to build large-scale hotels. And what they do is adopt the person-centered talk onto it. So we have all got a major challenge that I still not succeeded in the last 30 years. Are we going to succeed in the next 20, 30 years to really get private equity really on board with the likes of us, to get architecture really on board to building households and not building large-scale hotel provision? Challenge number 5, there is no care sector consensus on removing all the them and us features. So I'm working in a care home at the moment, very close to me here in York, on a new initiative called The Path. And The Path has many steps to it. The first step was we get rid of uniforms, we get rid of lanyards, we get rid of badges, we get rid of staff stood watching people eat like at the zoo instead of sitting and being with people like a family. We get rid of the drug trolley parked in the middle of people's living rooms. And we get rid of call bell systems. You know, all of this stuff is still weirdly seen as revolution. And yet we still, for all the industry that's written about, video, trained about, we haven't got the basic yet of getting rid of them and us. Challenge number 6, and I'm going to talk in detail about this. Dementia care training still persists about them. You know, dementia care training is never, ever about them, others, other people. And I'll talk more about what the basis of dementia care training should be about. Tom Kitwood called it a moral education. That's why when I was at the university and they said about making me a professor of dementia care, I said, no. The thing I've learned after 45 years is it's not about dementia care. I don't want to be a professor of dementia care. It's actually about emotional labour. It's about actually the emotions in staff teams and in leaders. And it's actually about how do you create an emotionally intelligent culture of care. The next slide. So my challenge number 7 is failing regulation continues to persist on process. So in the UK, a few years ago, I thought we turned the corner. We had UK regulation that was utterly focused on qualitative observation of people's lived experience, with inspectors sitting in care homes using dementia care mapping to really map people's moment by moment lived experience. Oh no, it's all been swept away. COVID swept it away. We now have inspectors who don't visit care homes at all, but ask for mounds of paperwork on process. So we're going to have to, really enliven again globally this whole issue of how do we emphasize inspection on lived experience. Challenge number 8, families are not empowered to fight back. There's a mass collusion in society to not educate families on the real choices. While families don't know that there's real choices out there, like the greenhouse model, like Dolf's work, like butterfly homes that I used to work with, like all these models that, and like, obviously Nicole's pioneering in Australia. While people don't know they exist, while there's no movement to publicly educate, we don't create any mass movement. Families are not marching in the streets against the care sector because they're overgrateful and they're being pinned down to not know that there's any other alternative. What are we all going to do about that as a next challenge? And challenge number 9, society politically, morally hides from creating that national movement. It doesn't want to address the financial implications. It doesn't want politically for us all to actually start to own what would it cause and need and create to tax us all to pay for what it would really take to deliver this. So for me, that's why I talked about this in terms of a crisis and 9 challenges. But I then want to move on in a minute to that. There's just this slide here. Home is a feeling, not a place. This fits utterly, as you've said, Dolf, with your work. This again was a quote from 1995 to me in my study. I know it looks nice, but I have that niggling feeling that although the place looks nice and the people are nice, it's an institution rather than a home. We still don't seem to have grasped that the feeling of home is design. It's about being inside ourselves. One more on a quote from someone living with dementia. An absolute classic, and I remember this woman well from nearly 30 years ago, sat in a care home lounge saying, there are more than 24 hours in a day here. What do I now focus my work on? What do I think is the answer? What do I want you to consider, evaluate whether you want to take more of this approach that I'm following? The next slide. Thank you. Sorry, the next slide after that one. Thank you. All my work now in emotional intelligence in care and in dementia care is about being vulnerable. And I have this phrase, we're only a flicker away. All it takes tonight, this morning, this afternoon, to each of you, one phone call, one text, one message, and it can take you right back to past trauma, right back to trauma today. We're all only a flicker away. Am I Professor David Sheard, sat here, age 66, with a 40-odd year career in dementia care? Or am I the 8-year-old little boy with a policeman come to tell my mum at the door that my dad's died this morning, age 31, of a heart attack? Am I the man at 26, married with a toddler, but really knowing I was a gay man inside and having to sit a wife down and say to her, I've loved you to bits. You've been everything. Thank you for unconditionally loving me enough to say the words I've never been able to say. Or am I the man at 46 who was walking down the train platform and put my ticket in the barrier, and excuse my language, as I put the ticket in, thought, shit, this is the day, as I hit the ground, having a major heart attack. 4 hours later, in cardiac intensive care, having the second heart attack, with a nurse holding my hand as the crash team came, saying, we're not going to let this lovely man go. And Peter, my partner, and my daughter having to race hours and hours and hours because they were a long way away, being told he's less than 4 weeks, he won't make it. He wouldn't come off an operating table alive. So all my work is train on this, train on our life stories, our emotional being inside, train on the painful moments that are inside us, get the staff to share them with each other, create posters about our emotional lives, put them up in the care homes, get the staff to then do the same with people living with dementia and with their families and say, we're all only a flicker away. Next slide, please. So this is a quote to back this. Embracing, supporting vulnerability in staff, families, people with dementia is the very heart of being person-centred. Throw away all the hijacked person-centred language. Challenge it out there in all the brochures and philosophies. Emotional resilience goes hand in hand with a culture that sees vulnerability as a strength. Tom Kitwood talked about that this was about a moral education in care. And people think all sorts of things about me. Yes, I have the followers. And then I have the people say, oh, I think it's a bit worrying about David. Why does he share all this stuff? And oh, you know, he's the guy who cries at the lectern. And I'm not sure about it. And you can be sure always that those are the detached professionals judging me. What we're after is creating a culture of attached professionals, proud of their vulnerability, proud of their life stories, proud of who they are on the inside, and also knowing they're only a flicker away. It can take seconds and you're there in a moment. Do I ever say to a person with dementia, this is the story of my life, this is what happened to me? Never, never, never. But I feel it. And when I'm sat or when I'm holding someone's hand or I'm hearing someone shout, help me, or someone screaming, I feel and think, I'm only a moment away from being this same person. I believe it's this sort of training with staff teams that makes staff teams then become impossible to walk by people sat in a chair staring into space. It becomes impossible to watch people eat and not share the meal. It becomes impossible to wear the lanyard around your neck. Only when you've got staff back to being vulnerable inside and knowing it's about all of us, we're all in this together, then the horrors of dementia care dissipate, start to go, because it just isn't possible to deliver malignant dementia care when you're vulnerable, because it's too painful. But when it's not painful is when you're not vulnerable, and then you can deliver, excuse my language, crap care and stick person-centered on it everywhere. Next slide, please. Brené Brown talks about this, not in dementia care, but in all her work on vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness. The uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure we face every day are not optional. It's not optional to us to be vulnerable. It's going to come in moments, and we have to draw on our emotional life history of how we're going to handle an emotional moment today. Our only choice is a question of engagement. And Brené says, our willingness to own and engage with our own vulnerability determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. Why do I work in dementia care? I used to say, well, because my dad died, my mum remarried, I had 3 grandmas, who had dementia, one had a psychosis in old age. Then I used to say, oh, it's because I had a brilliant placement at university with people with dementia in a hospital. It took me to being 26, coming out as a gay man, feeling utterly alone in the world, utterly bereft, utterly desperate, and realizing this is the real raw you, David. This is the you inside, and you're going to have to be who you really are. The genuine, authentic self. And yes, that might cost you. And there may be people who throw the stones and don't like it. People with dementia wake up like that every day. And they don't have, as Dolf said, the cognitive filters to work it all out and process it. They just feel it. That's why I work with people with dementia, because I know there's only a flicker away between me and the person I'm sat next to. Being scared, and people have said about this training I do on vulnerability. I've just taken 55 staff through it. And people, some social workers who came to it and outside agencies were saying, oh, I'm not sure about it. It's very exposing. Oh, you know, what about staff who don't want to engage in this? What about those who don't want to put their poster up in the home that tells their emotional life story? And it's all a con, because we're all living it and feeling it every day. All we're giving staff is permission to be real. Permission to be real. The next slide, please. So, this is what I've learned from 44 years in dementia care and as a human being. We need to match the culture in the care sector between what people are expected to give and what they then receive. The exodus is because we're not giving the staff what they're then expected to give out. You can't keep giving this out if you're not keep being filled up. Secondly, proving being person-centered is absolutely, you've got to prove it first to the team. You've got to prove it's coming from inside you as a leader, a regulator, a manager, a board member. People have to believe it's the core of why you wake up and your essence in the morning. Thirdly, we have to stop the dissonance between archaic recruitment processes, outdated performance management. But of course we want fair pay. But fair pay is not the only answer. You know, we need to recruit more imaginatively. We need to recruit on feelings. The first question people know I would always ask them in an interview is, can you tell us the most painful moment of your life? And if they look blank at me, I'd say, I'll tell you mine first, if that will help. But I do need you to go to that moment. I need you to know who you are inside, because that's the only way you and I are going to then know each other. And outdated performance management, wherever I go, I say, do you actually appraise the staff on being person-centered, on the inside of themselves? You can manage love you can measure it on the inside of someone. You can measure kindness. You can measure feelings. But half the performance management processes don't have any of this. And then we have to get organizations at every level, in regulation, in inspection, in commissioning, in boards, to measure people's lived experience. Not systems, not processes, not paperwork. Next slide, please. So that's why I'm a professor of emotional intelligence in care, because I believe it's about developing emotional labour strategies. Every organisation I now go into, I say, do you have an emotional labour strategy? And you can be almost certain the director of human resources or director of people, director of culture looks blank. And they don't even know what an emotional labour strategy is. And I say, well, that's where we've got to start. Not dementia care, not a care home. We have to find ways to create family-like household care. That's when people live and work together, thrive. So this, for me, is ditch dementia care training. Just as I say, ditch language about behaviours. Don't write about behaviours in care plans, write about feelings. Don't give out dementia care training. about conditions and memory and processes in the brain. Train on emotional intelligence. Search for authenticity in staff. Find their mutual vulnerability. And then create cultures from that. So my final words, and then I want to do something at the end, is Open the Doors 2030, fantastic, wow, wow, wow. I want to be a part of it. And I want as many people to join me and join Nicole and all her team and everyone in this. Opening doors into care communities, for me, is not about dementia. It's all about us. Let's go to the next slide. 2 to go. So this is a Zulu saying, and I want everyone to turn off their mute, and we're going to learn to speak Zulu. So if you can all turn off your mute.
Oh,
That's it. Great. Let's see all the mute buttons gone. That'd be lovely. So remember, this is in a UK Yorkshire accent speaking Zulu. So it's pretty flawed, but it's as good as I can do. So first word is Umuntu. Next word is Ungamuntu.
Muntu.
Third word is Ibanye. And then Abantu. So on the count of 3, we're all going to say this word, all the sentence. 1, 2, 3. And my final slide. I go to my final slide. Thank you. This is to prove to you, person-centered care is as old as the hills. This is a centuries old Zulu saying, I am a person through other people. That's the 2030 challenge. How are we going to get the care sector back to being a person through other people? My answer is by getting the training team all back to vulnerability. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry about the tears, but thank you for the tears. Thank you for feeding it as well.
Thank you, David. I'm a bit of a mess because I resonate with everything you say, and I have also shed a lot of tears listening to you speak. Your shared vulnerability, your ability to see the emotional being that is all of us. You resonate with us so deeply, and a lot of other people out there. Please continue to be vulnerable. I also see the same faces sometimes when I present, and we just must push ourselves through the clinical and into the emotional state, because that is where the problem lies. And I hope that everyone enjoyed that as much as I did. Gwenda, you had your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
No.
I know it's overwhelming because we're all just like, not a dry eye in the house. Did anyone want to ask a question? Please do it now. Or have a comment for David.
Thank you.
Just some comments from Kirsten. Thank you, David, for sharing. You're a truly wonderful human being. Amazing things. Josephine is done apologising for her tears. I think my team really resonated with everything you were saying, because I'll ask them now, did you feel the same effect in our model? Give us a little thumbs up or a love heart if you feel that CHA has a lot of those emotional elements that David has talked about tonight. Here's my team coming through. And I really do think it's the way forward, having a human approach, not even really needing to understand so much about the dementia, but understanding people from minute to minute. If you are suffering, I am with you. If you're crying, I'm crying with you. If you're laughing, I'm laughing with you. And I think that the humanity side of it is something that really needs to come through. Combined with the incredible work that Dolf is doing, that would make you two unstoppable, really.
Perhaps, Nicole, I could throw a question back out to people. What do people feel, essentially, about switching their training from dementia care onto vulnerability? What do people feel about that?
awesome.
So the question was switching over from dementia to vulnerability training. I think
from dementia care training in its traditional sense about conditions, causes, problems, behaviours, and actually switching the training to we're always going to commence training always with training on our own vulnerability.
Would everyone agree with that? I personally agree with that. We have a saying.
100%.
Yeah. One, is that you, Perry, who was saying that?
Vicky.
Yeah. Yes, 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 and yes. We have a saying, we can look up what kind of dementia you have if we ever have to call an ambulance. But until then, you're just a person. You're Gay, you're Nicole, you're David. We need to stop overthinking that as registered nurses, we're acting like neurologists, like geriatricians. I don't care what your diagnosis is. If you've got Korsakoff, if you've got frontal lobe, it's important when your geriatric psych register comes to visit to review your medication. But why do I need to know it? And I think we get obsessed with the diagnostic side of it. Yes, you need to know a little bit, but the first thing you should see is other people and work backwards from there is the humanitarian side of it. Okay, Josephine and then Mary.
Yeah, just to comment, first of all, like I feel so understood. That's the feeling that I have, David, is just feel so understood.
Thank you.
One of the things I did in my past role was I supported families, and I remember a session we had when families were saying, "This is so great. I want to come here and learn as much about dementia as I possibly can." And so I said to them, I said, "If you've come to learn about dementia, you've come to the wrong place, because I'm not a dementia expert, but I'm here to help you get comfortable with your emotions and with noticing the emotions of your loved one." Like that to me was the essence of what I wanted to support people to do, so they could actually have quality moments together that they weren't having before. So vulnerability, absolutely. Dementia, that's secondary. I see person. That's what I want to see.
Mary, you had a comment or question for David? You're on mute. Or maybe not. There we go.
Huh. Maybe I still don't get this system. I'm a Zoom person. David, I really appreciate very, very much. And just as someone who spent the last 40 years, in part of which I was a group therapist, and learned a lot about, in a way, the need to give up the chair, if you will. And I think that seems related to what you're saying, because I think that, yes, I think it's important to treat people as human beings. And I mean, that I wish that went without saying in our culture. But I don't know that we relate to a lot of people as human beings. I think we tend to label and categorize. So I was saying, but I love the call that you're putting out. And, you know, and I guess if I would add, in I think a very supportive way, and in the spirit of Kitwood, I think, I think it's just, I just feel the importance of also addressing that to be vulnerable, particularly as a professional, and I know this well, one has to give up the chair and the expertise, and we collectively have to kind of address, do we want to do that together? And that's not easy. I'm saying that sympathetically. I'm not saying that critically, because I don't think it's easy for anyone to give up. Particularly in a culture that so overvalues expertise. And where the whole notion of caring is, I'm the one who knows how to help you, and you're the person in need of help. So maybe what this makes me think about is just how much, and again, I think I've had some experience in this that I would love to share, and share the work that's been done. But no matter what it looks like, it's how do we work together to create environments in which that's even possible? Because you can't do it in just any old environment. I don't care what anyone says. We didn't get this we didn't get this way just because we're a bunch of bad people. It's the very underpinnings of what we understand by care and what it means to be caring. So I'm just saying, I think the broader, and in a way, in and outside of the institutions, we relate this way. I wish it was just in these really bad nursing homes, but that's not true. I mean, we do this with each other all the time. So I love that in a way you're saying, hey, let's look at this much more broadly. Let's look at ourselves and each other, and how do we want to revise the very way we're trained from the get-go? You know, I mean, it raises a whole lot of very practical and philosophical, if you will, questions. So thank you for just sparking that.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, you hit a really important point about overvaluing expertise and giving up the chair. You know, I talk about the difference between detachment and attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all come from professions that value detached care, and trained us even to be detached, and actually held that up as the pinnacle, and didn't value emotions in us on the inside. And so, yeah, moving to an attached model, I think, is the revolution in care, because then all the horrors of care are staring us in the face and screaming at us. But while you're detached, you don't see it, hear it, feel it.
We've got a question from Malene. I hope I'm saying that right. Malene. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
No, it's absolutely. Oh, sorry.
No, please ask your question.
No, it's absolutely fine. It was more of a comment. Well, first of all, I'm really touched, and maybe it won't even allow me to say what I want to say. Sorry.
Thank you for feeling. I can feel that. Yeah, that it's choked you up. But that's really powerful. That's powerful. That's in you.
Yeah.
What
I wanted to say or share was just that I'm a health professional as well, but I live with my parents who have both dementia, and I think that everything you've said is just the absolute way to work with this, because people can only stigmatize as long as they can look at something described in a medical way, and not just being with the people. And what we did in my parents' home when we started bringing carers in, because they were told from the company that came into our house not to become friends with people they care for. And then I kept hearing them talking about my parents and not to my parents, and I kept saying to them, will you please just say you and not talk about toilet issues in the living room, but be aside and just see the person that is there and believe what you're seeing, because my mom is in a late stage of Alzheimer's, and she's almost like a unicorn. we've been stimulating her for 10 years, and even though a lot of functioning has disappeared, then she's actually very clear-minded still. Her ethics and morals and everything is just spot on. Although she has moments where she's not as clear, but she's amazing. But anyway, so I came up with this silly idea that just took us a bit further down the right way, which was I started asking the carers when they came into our home, because there's 12 of them. So what's the most horrible disease that you can think of other than dementia? And then they said something, chlamydia or something like that. And then I said, yeah, well, will you then please introduce yourself as a chlamydia every time we see each other? Because if you think that's silly, then imagine how silly it is for my parents to just use that as a diagnosis. Yeah, and that one person is still laughing every time she arrives, and then she looks at me and she's found a new diagnosis every time, and she's never forgot. You know, she started being with them instead of being around them and talking about them.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I think that was part of it. I wanted to say so much, but I was just kind of overwhelmed with the whole thing. But thank you
so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And please come to all the meetings and keep being a lighthouse for people with dementia, because this is an egoless platform of knowledge transference that will go worldwide, and every single person is important. It is not just clinicians and thought leaders. It is the carers working night shift for 40 years that have developed a little way of making sure that people get the right cups of tea in the mornings. It is someone from Africa trying to stop witchcraft, as being the reason for someone with dementia. It is, people like Dr. David Sheard and Dolf Becx. This is for everyone. There is no one that isn't invited to this table. Eventually, I'm hoping some of those legislators and people that may not access platforms like this will start to show up. And in my head, I know exactly who they are, but I'm not going to name and shame anyone. But once they start joining in, I know that we're winning the fight. So please continue to be emotional and vulnerable and use your voice to empower others. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a quick question? I could stay here all night. I could get a sleeping bag and a big pot of coffee. I really could. But is there anyone else that had a question that was waiting that I have not seen in the moderator chat? I think Althea, you had a question or a comment. Oh, you're just under my head, so I'm moving myself to see you. Hi. Did you want to ask a quick question? Off mute though. I can't lip read yet.
Is that better?
Yes, we're good.
I don't know. Headphones, right? Technology. It's a winning tool. I just twofold. It's partly a comment and partly a question. David, I've followed your work since Jason Burton brought you out to WA, probably about 8 years ago now. Okay. I guess both you and Dolf were kind of talking about, like you speak about really knowing the person and walking in their shoes and knowing their narrative. And I work in this industry because of many reasons, but mainly because of that lady on my shoulder there, my mom. And I always get emotional and I'm never apologetic about it. I guess for me, it's how I interact in this space, because I felt so strongly that my mum was never listened to. And I guess my real question is, and it was kind of touched on before, but I spoke about mum until I was blue in the face. Dolf was absolutely correct. I did not know anything. There was a huge part of her life I had no idea about. And, I'm reconnecting to relatives in the UK, in York. And, and they're all giving me this information that I was just mind blown about. And then I'm transferring it, and it's quite sensitive, quite emotional information that I'm understanding now that it's what my mum was reliving, and it was awful. And I guess, how do you talk those naysayers into investing into this method and that it actually works? Because you have research. I mean, heck, you're now a professor, and Dolf has research. There's research. You can find research everywhere. And I guess for me, when I look at scholarly articles, there's as much research out there as there is for these other, person-centered care methods. But where do we trip over on the buy-in? Where do we trip over? Because, my mum had this amazing saying when she was first diagnosed, and we both ended up getting the tattoo, from fear comes understanding. And it was her belief. She wrote it up above the computer, and that was her thing. And I think, it was her idea. She used to advocate a lot and talk to people. And it was her idea that we fear the unknown, and what we don't know scares us. But once we know the unknown, then we're not scared, and we can move forward in this glorious kind of way. And you speak about emotional intelligence. She was the epitome of emotional intelligence. She was undeniably the most emotionally intelligent human being that I've, maybe yourself aside, David, but that I've had the pleasure of knowing. And you could tell by micro expression, she passed away last August, but you could tell from a micro expression, she knew what was happening, and I could relay what that meant. And they would look at me like I was this weirdo speaking some crazy language. But then I would capture footage of me resolving that issue in an emotionally intelligent way, and I could knock them over with a feather. They were just like, how did you do that? And I'm like, because I did the things that I told you, that I told you about, how I've lived with this woman for 30 odd years. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah. That. Yeah. And it just blows my mind that this amazing platform to speak from. And Dolf does too. You have these research-backed methods. You have this innovative approach. We have a Royal Commission in Australia telling us how shite it is and how it's not working. So why would you not look outside the box with someone like yourself who's got it on a platter going, here's something tried and tested, want to check it out because what you're doing is not working, and we've got all these recommendations that are sitting there that are telling us it's not working.
Oh goodness, I think I now need a year to keep talking to you, Althea. Lovely to see you again in Australia. I think I'll answer as quickly as I can. I think because what you're essentially asking is two questions. Can you teach emotional intelligence? You're asking that. And you're also asking, do we want all of us to create an emotional intelligence society? Can you teach it? I used to think not. Now I think you can. But I think to teach or develop or help someone around their own emotional intelligence, you have to have permission from them to help thaw them out.
Yeah.
People need thawing out to be able to
100%.
become emotionally intelligent. And that requires a lot of complex work around why they're frozen in the first place. I think the second thing is around families. Families often don't want to share the life history of the person living with dementia. And it took me bizarrely, should have been obvious to me, but it took me bizarrely ages to realise the reason they didn't want to share the life story of the person living with dementia was because it was their life story. And actually, we were asking for families' life stories. And I think we need to be much more explicit and open with families about why we're asking really for theirs. Because we are asking for theirs, so we might as well be straight about them with that. And I've been doing that work in the last few weeks with a family group. And then about the type of society, we all know we're increasingly growing up and living in a very disconnected society, a society that's becoming very, very shut off from itself, and social media contributing to that, and mental health dilemmas increasing across all age groups, particularly in the young. And I think, this is a bigger movement than dementia care and in the care sector. This is a movement about, are we going to have emotional intelligence rather than artificial intelligence? Which society are we really going to want?
Thank you so much. We have been here for longer than I thought, but I don't regret a second of any of these conversations. They're so important. They will continue. We have a final wrap up from Michael.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Yes, just very quickly, I'll go through a few action items. So, celebration, first of all, we have now 240 dedicated door openers. And I'd imagine after this inspiring couple of presentations today, that will hit 300 by the next meeting we have in a couple of weeks, hopefully. So please do share with your networks everything you've heard today. In the next few days, you'll be receiving post-meeting recap newsletters, which will have the recording of today's meeting and lots of resources about OTD. In the newsletter, there will be a poll for you to continue to vote on discussion topics. So what we're planning to do is continue with the 2 weekly meetings and presentations for the foreseeable future. But at some point, we're going to revert to monthly meetings in this style. And then between those meetings, have a keys to the door session, which will be more like a breakout discussion on specific topics. So it could be around language, it could be about education, it could be about creativity or other topics. So please do vote on those topics, what you would like to contribute. And please do email any of the founders or reply to the newsletter if you'd like to present a future meeting, or if you have any people you'd like to nominate. Just some upcoming conferences, and please do, if you know of any resources that you'd like to share or upcoming conferences or things of interest, please do send them in. But we have the Aged Care Conference in Bali run by Namport, which starts on the 26th of August. Community Home Australia has a leadership retreat in conjunction with that conference on the 30th, or starting on the 30th of August. It's the International Dementia Conference in Sydney on the 5th of September, or from the 5th of September. And the Home Care Reform, Quality, Safety and Risk Forum starts in Sydney on the 11th of September. So again, if you'd like to present a future meeting, please do email us. And again, please do share the good news and the excitement and inspiration with all your networks. Thanks very much.
And just to let you know, there are many people from Open the Doors speaking at NAMPART. I'll be launching Open the Doors in Indonesia. There will be a media launch around it because there is a website coming. We haven't gone too far into it, but we are creating a resource of all of this information that can be accessed rapidly, so you don't have to do all of the searching and the thinking by yourself anymore. You can just log in anytime and say, how do I do person-centered care for the LGBTQI community? How do I do person-centered care in a rural and remote setting? We're going to have Indigenous person-centered care. We're going to have highlighted work like David's work and Dolf's work. So you don't have to go scrambling. We're going to do all of it for you. It's all volunteer basis. That comes out in August. If you have suggestions for the website, please let us know. I will obviously be hosting with Dr. Rodney the leadership retreat so you can see what we're doing in Indonesia. Please join us if you are in Asia or you want to go to Asia. And the International Dementia Conference, I will be speaking on the main stage about residential small-scale environments, and I'll be sneaking some Open the Doors stuff onto the main stage if I can. So thank you so much once again. I love every one of these meetings, and I've just been delighted to have you all here with us. You'll get links to David and Dolf's work to continue following them and sharing their amazing approaches to the world of dementia support. So thanks again. Lovely seeing you all, and we'll see you in a fortnight. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.